It's day 49, 13,173 verses left. Now that you've read all the poetry and wisdom bits of the Bible, we move on to the major prophets, and we're starting with Isaiah. At the beginning it says that Isaiah said all of this stuff while Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz and Hezekiah were each kings over Jerusalem. Who the heck are they? You can find out all about those guys from days 27, 28 and 33. And when you do, it'll help you understand why God's got some pretty scary things to say because the kings kept rebelling against him. He says their sacrifices are meaningless, that their hands are full of blood and that God's going to ignore all of their prayers. Oh, I wonder if he had any mates. But even though they're making a mess of everything, God still wants to restore them, and it seems throughout the book that God's concocting a plan to do just that. There's a little nod to this in chapter 2 when he says that instead of having sword fights, they'll all be gardeners. That sounds a lot less fun. But that in the meantime, all the arrogant men are going to have to hide in caves because God's going to shake the earth. It all starts going especially wrong in chapter 3 when they start to appoint leaders just because they're dressed like Superman. And these first few chapters are designed to show just how bad it gets when people turn away from God, oppress the poor and please themselves. Turns out God's not a big fan of drinking games. In chapter 6, Isaiah has this amazing vision of God and he's surrounded by angels and there's smoke and the whole temple's shaking and he gets commissioned to be a prophet. Oh, don't try the burning coals thing at home, even if you've been really bad. Chapters 7 and 8 are all about how God rescues Jerusalem from the king of Aram, and you can see that whole story in 2 Kings 16 from day 28. And apparently it's Christmas again and we get introduced to a guy who's going to pop up in about 700 years time in the New Testament. He'll be a mighty God and a prince of peace and he'll reign on David's throne forever and ever, which is super interesting because remember on day 22 God promised David a throne that would never end. The second half of chapter 9 is based on 2 Kings 17 where the whole of Israel gets defeated and captured by the king of Assyria and it all gets pretty darn horrible. But it says at the beginning of chapter 10 that it's all happening because they've neglected justice and they've oppressed the poor. Man, God hates it when poor people get stitched up. Chapter 10 is all about the defeat of the king of Assyria, Sennacherib, in 2 Kings 18, and then in chapter 11 David's successor pops up again and apparently he really switches up what you'll be able to do in a safari park. Tune in tomorrow for the devastation of the earth.